So I've been reading this Memoirs of J.M. Dent on and off for about a month now. It's a very interesting book about J.M. Dent's publishing career, how he started out as a book binder and then moved into publishing and eventually into uh, creating, such landmark series as the Everyman's Library. But as I said, I've been reading this on and off for about a month, several weeks. And I had known when I purchased it that it was signed in the front by Hugh R. Dent, one of the sons of J.M. Dent, in April of 1933, and that it was dedicated to Reverend George H. McNeill. And from what I knew about him, I gathered that he was, a British reverend, and that this book was sold. Well, this book was given to him in London or sold in London. We do have a bookseller sticker here. But I didn't think much more about it until I was sitting here reading. And as you can see, I'm getting near the end. And when I get near the end, I start to, pay more attention to the back of the book because I'm one of those readers who sort of feels the book as I read. I'll kind of flip through the end pages when I start getting closer to them. And I was flipping and I felt a paperclip. Paperclip that's a little bit old and rusty. There is also this pin here, a very rusty pin. And I realized, oh, there's something in the back here, hidden between some of the end papers, tucked in nicely there. And I guess I hadn't flipped through all of them. And it was kind of stuck in the back. And obviously I hadn't looked closely because I had missed these. There's two letters here. There was a paper clip here. Actually, no, the paper clip was down there. I guess it was both because it was folded over. They were folded over like this with the paper clip and the pin in there. And this is the second page of the second letter. And it's actually, glued into the binding here, which I think is how I missed it. Because normally when there's letters or newspaper clippings, they kind of flutter around, and nothing fluttered around. I think, when I was flipping through the end papers, all I saw was this side of the paper. Regardless of what happened, somehow I failed to notice these up until about 15 minutes ago when I realized, hey, there's some letters in the back here. And I realized, oh, they're signed by Hugh Dent, by J.M. Dent's son. And they are from the J.M. Dent and Sons Limited, the official letterhead. And they are addressed to the person that the copy of this book was dedicated to in the front, the Reverend G.H. McNeill, at Wellesley's Chapel, City Road. I'm not sure what the SE1 there means, but I do know that Wellesley's Chapel is in London. And so we just have these nice letters. And so this is the first one. Hugh Dent says, Dear Mr. McNeill, I have just seen a press cutting from the Northern Dispatch, dated the 28th March. In it, I note that you have said some very kind words about my father and his work as a publisher, and I feel that I should like personally to thank you for doing so, especially as you spoke them in his native town. I don't know whether you have a copy of the chief's memoirs, but in it there is a picture of the house where he was born, which is in Archer Street, just off the High Row. Perhaps if you go to Darlington again, you will be able to see it, because at present it is called the Pridania Inn. I don't know whether you have a copy of the chief's book, but if you haven't, I would be very delighted to send you a copy. And the only reason I don't do so now is that I don't want to present you with something you already have. And so he signs off. And evidently, G.H. McNeill must have responded with another letter saying that he didn't have a copy that first letter is from the 4th of April, because on the 7th of April, 1933, just a few days later, He writes again, and he says, "My dear Mr. McNeill, what a delightfully warm-hearted letter you have written to me. It is a real pleasure to be able to send you a copy of my father's memoirs, and as nearly the whole book has been written by himself, I think you will have a better picture of the man himself that I could have given you, although I have been with him in this business from 14 years of age until the day he died in 1926. It was a very great consolation to him in the last few years of his life to realize and to be told by other people that he had been of real service to his day and generation. The tradition of this business was founded and is, I hope, being carried on so that his work and influence will not, I think, be confined to his own generation. I did have the pleasure of meeting you some years ago when my cousin, the Reverend C.E. Dent, who was over from South Africa, took me to Wellesley's Chapel, a place I hadn't visited since I was a boy, when I went occasionally with my mother. Poor Charlie unfortunately died a year or two after he got back to Africa, but he was very happy at having seen something of England, and especially of London. I should like to come down time or other to Wellesley Chapel and have a few minutes to talk with, and here's where we'll flip over to the page that's pasted into the book here, to talk with you, but it will have to wait for a week or two, and before calling I will take the liberty of telephoning to make sure it is quite convenient. With kind regards, yours sincerely, Hugh R. Dent. And I do wonder if he ever went down to Wellesley's Chapel, or if this was the end of their correspondence and their acquaintance. But that's quite neat, and I'm just going to tuck the pages back in here. If this one weren't glued in, I might remove them all together and put them somewhere else. But at this point, because it's so well pasted, I'm afraid of tearing it if I try to take it out. But I'm certainly not putting the rusty pin or the rusty paperclip or metal of any kind back into the book. And I'm sure that's probably just something that the owner here did when he received the book in 1933. He probably just thought, oh, I'll just paste this in and pin it in, and that'll be fine. Not thinking what 90 years would do to the metal of that pin and paperclip. But there we go. That's rather interesting. It makes the book even more interesting than I was already finding it. As you can see, I'm 3/4 of the way through, quite enjoying it. There was a passage in it about how he had, Balzac's Comedy Humaine translated and published. He talks about publishing Shakespeare. He talks about the idea for the Everyman's Library series and how its success was almost a disaster because they published 50 books at first, knowing that they had the money and the resources to publish the next 50 as promised. What they didn't count on was the incredible success of the first 50 and how the demand for those would lead to additional print runs, and how those additional print runs would, of course, sell a little bit slower than the first print run, tying up a lot of their resources and a lot of their money. And so ultimately, because of the success of Everyman's Library, they ended up building an entirely new factory outside of London and expanding how many books they were able to print and bind. And I think it's very interesting. I've just gotten to the part where he and his wife are visiting the United States and Canada and talking about expanding potentially into Canada. So as I said, a very interesting book, made all the more interesting by these letters tucked into the back.